A president who needs his ego stroked at every step of the way. A bigoted vice president well known for just harassing his own people. It's 1968, and Richard Nixon is the president. Spiro Agnew is the vice president. There's a joke going around that Mickey Mouse wears a Spiro Agnew watch. That joke is actually repeated on this album. I don't know, honestly, I don't know if this is the origin of this or not. This is Richard the 37th, The Agnew and the Ecstasy. It's by David Martin. There are a lot of really great performers on this, including the great Chuck McCann, whose name you will know from cartoons and TV, but also from The First Family. He's the only guy left from The First Family, actually, and a guy we would love to have on the podcast. So I picked this because, well, I already had it recorded. I was in a rush, and I knew it was one of my other Nixon ones. So, I didn't know which Nixon one to pick, so I'm glad I picked this one for a number of reasons. It's not the impressions on it are fine. It's not the best Nixon or the best Agnew necessarily, but neither of them are bad. But that's not the point. The point is not really that. The point is the content, and it's sketch, but there are also some songs. Agnew and Nixon each get their own song in this. Those are probably my favorite parts of it, if only because every once in a while there are definitely some things that are very of the time in terms of very specific references that, unfortunately, I don't know enough of the specifics about Nixon to really get every single reference, except for him constantly wanting even his family to call him Mr. President instead of Daddy. And let me say this about that. That he says a variation of "let me say this about that" throughout the whole album. It's a running gag. It's very sitcom-y, actually. It's almost like a sitcom album, but a sketch album. And to the extent that I'm pretty sure there's no actual live laughter. Some of it sounds, it's okay canned laughter, but I'm pretty sure it's all canned. It's a lot of fun. I was actually, I took a few notes. I don't take notes every time. And one of the notes that I took is, hey, why don't you get out your Spiro Agnew watch, which I do own. And I cannot for the life of it find me. I've been obsessed, find it. I've been obsessed with the vice presidency along with my buddy Matt Sachs for a long time, and that's why I started collecting these, actually, because I loved comedy vinyl. But I'm like, you know what? These will be interesting. I can hear stuff about Spiro Agnew. Obviously, the concentration is Nixon, but I figured I'd get some good Agnew stuff, and I'm not disappointed, especially on this. The final song of the final track of Side A is a song called "Only a Heartbeat Away," and it's just Spiro Agnew probably being paraphrased, actually, but they're just really playing with his very well-known racism and how we're going to help people that let's see, here we go. Is it here? Where is it? Okay, yeah. Towards the end of that song, he says he's talking about how they want to help the Negro and also the Afro-Americans. He says three different terms for the same group of people. Only with our help will they ever know their place. And then he uses all kinds of other, almost every other racial slur you can think of, because again, Spiro Agnew, well-known bigot. These are two guys who, whose careers ended in disgrace. Never had much of a political career, but they were fine afterwards. But they didn't have the impact on government that they could have after that point. You see, what happened was they were all about perception, and they were all about shifting the public's perception. And they were okay at manipulating words. They were okay at, but it was to the point where everybody noticed it. Nattering nabobs of negativism is one of the most well-known Spiro Agnewisms that he probably didn't even write, but very likely he did not write. But he became well-known for these things, and whereas you're supposed to stand out and maybe make him an interesting figure, and I don't know how you're supposed to do anything but laugh at that. And Nixon, same kind of thing. Let me say this about that. What's interesting is a lot of these things kind of became adopted and adapted down the line for political speak and doublespeak. It's very handy for doublespeak. They became adapted and eventually synthesized by big time campaign managers and political PR people. They actually found the useful stuff within the sort of obvious dipshittiness, for lack of a better word, in the way these guys acted. They found the interesting stuff and, like I said, synthesized it. And that's what became the bullshit politician that many of us grew up with in the 80s and then the 90s. And what's interesting is how it's all come full circle. Again, I made those comparisons for fun, but it's interesting. I was making a point earlier that I got a little distracted on. Surprise, surprise. Perception was what they were all about. And perception changed thanks to the persistence of guys like the Smothers Brothers, thanks to reporters like Woodward and Bernstein, thanks to guys like this. Every guy who, when I say guy, I'm talking about generally, every person who made one of these albums is making me think, even if some of them are kind of bad, there's a lot of them. Now, you can say, well, obviously they're capitalizing on a thing. You don't really write political satire to capitalize on a thing. It's one thing to do the other family, the Russian first family that I talked about yesterday. This is having a fun poke. I mean, first of all, they're poking at the opposition in the Cold War. The first family was never meant to just 100% crap on the Kennedys. That was never the point of it. Satire, yes, but it's not hard political satire like this. This is the result of anger. Even the cheaper rippy-offy stuff is still done out of anger. Nobody's doing. Let's say this is the most famous Richard Nixon parody album. Nobody would go and do another one just like it, unless if they like Nixon. You know, they're not doing it to make money. You don't go out of your way. By the way, that's Spiro Agnew's an egghead. You don't go out of your way to do that unless you're trying to make a point. So I really think that just the abundance of those albums speaks to, well, first of all, it speaks to people being disappointed, feeling marginalized, but it also speaks to the power of these things. You can't say that the comedy albums destroyed Richard Nixon. However, they helped magnify the hubris that ended up destroying Richard Nixon, and they changed public perception, which is what you have to do. Yeah, I mean, it's important to keep making these things. I mean, comedians, they always sit and they'll doubt themselves whenever something big happens. I remember when 9/11 happened, one of the first comedy tragedies of that. There's a scale here. You got to look at two different columns here. Ooh. Different part of the pie chart, something like that. One of the first comedy things to happen that made me sad was watching Conan O'Brien ask the question, can we joke anymore? We don't know, but we're going to try. It was very sad for me to see Conan just question that. We all were, to an extent, but in my heart I was like, no, I know this is important, because at the time I wasn't making comedy, and it was very important to see somebody do that. We just have to keep making good comedy. Now I'm going to correct that. We just need to keep making comedy. It just needs to be pointed. Your goal as a comedian, if you want to do satire, is to change perception. Now, a lot of times when you do satire, you have to make sure that you can pick at both sides. Otherwise, what you're doing is propaganda. Now, you can have a position when you do satire, but you have to be able to see both sides in order to, if you're going to nail one side, you have to be able to see both sides and find the similarities, find the differences. It's a careful balancing act to do. But in this case, obviously, this is not picking a side. This is very specifically going after two people and some agendas that were straining relations between the government and the people. When that happens, you have to have fun with it, which sounds like I'm lightening it up, but I think you need to just keep making stuff. Keep making satire. It's important. The abundance in this case, I grabbed the wrong album. The abundance is what was important. There was a lot of it. And again, while that didn't actually make the difference, there are times when there's people whose egos are so fragile, that kind of thing will affect them. So it's important to keep that in mind, especially if you're a comedian. I know it seems like a soapbox, but I'm sitting on a futon. And also, I don't care. I've got very strong opinions about comedy. Hi. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing a podcast about comedy albums. Well, that's it. My name's Jason Klom. That's it for this episode. I mean, I'm going to keep doing these. I, again, host the Comedy on Vinyl podcast. Go to comedyonvinyl.com. Subscribe everywhere at Comedy on Vinyl is where we are. YouTube.com/Comedy on Vinyl, which is very likely where you found this. Go to stolendress.com. Just going to show this again. That's our company logo. Go to stolendress.com for all the other stuff that I do. I was just on the Obsessed podcast with Joseph Scrimshaw talking about Lego. I don't have any cool Lego right here to grab, but I would show it to you. Talk about my Lego Cheers bar, which is one of my favorite things that I've ever done. And yeah, that was a ton of fun. If you just look up Obsessed podcast, very easy to find. And that is about it for this episode. And as always, I'm just rushing through the stuff. As always, have a good thing.